I'm just going to do a quick introduction to our cast. So hopefully all of you saw the roadmap stream on Tuesday. So we have a returning guest from that, who it was their first appearance for RuneScape with us, which was amazing. Mod Markos is here with us again. Hello, Mod Markos.
Hello, how are you?
Good, good. Yeah, it's. I think there's a lot to talk about today, but I'm excited. I think I'm still pretty buzzed up from that stream. So I don't know about you, but like, it's been a fun week for RuneScape. That's for sure, eh?
Yeah, it's been busy. That's what I'll say. Been very busy the last few weeks.
Yeah, there's been a lot building up to it for sure. And then also, just to introduce one other guest before we get into it with me and Marcos, Mod Jack is with us. Hey, Mod Jack, it's been a
Hello.
while since we let you loose on Discord.
Yeah, I'm excited to get back to talking far too much.
The subject of the show is to let you get to know Marcus a little bit, and also to talk a little bit about what's been going on at the studio. But given that Marcos has been with us for, what is it, a month or so now, Marcos? Something like that? Been working with us?
Around that, yeah. I think it's about like 3-4 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, so given that Marcus has assimilated a lot in a 4-week period, but we thought it'd be good to have Mod Jack here as well, especially to talk about some things around last year and kind of some of the things we took forward as well. So, all right, I guess we'll get into it. Chat, hello, by the way, we see you. Some people talking about Mod Markos here, save the game. So some people already hyping you up in chat, Marcos, which is really, really cool. So let's get a little bit to know you first, I think, Marcos. Firstly, like, how are you feeling after that roadmap reveal? Where are you sitting right now?
Yeah, I feel good. I think that obviously before you do it's a fairly big deal, wasn't it, the live stream? So you always have a bit of nerves around like, we thought the roadmap was good, but you obviously never know exactly how people are going to respond to it and so on. So really pleased to see like that. Generally, it seems to be like the response has been really positive from a large percentage of the community, and hopefully it managed to kind of surpass people's kind of expectations, I guess, in terms of going into that. Because I realised there'd been a somewhat fallow period in recent months, and then now, obviously, the main challenge is really with us to make sure we actually deliver on it, because actually putting together a roadmap graphic and so on is the easy bit. Actually building it and making sure the updates are really good and we keep like delivering them to the players is like the key thing now.
Yeah, it's funny you mention about like the nerves going in, because I think all of us were like looking at the roadmap and going, "This is really good, right? Yeah, this is really good, right? Like, yeah, I think it is. I think players are gonna love this, right?" And everyone's just like nervously like wanting it to be amazing and kind of exceed people's expectations. Obviously, that's always the hope, but like there was that kind of everyone at the studio going, "We think it's good. We hope." Like you just never know, do you, until you go out and stream? And it's a weird spot to be, isn't it? Mentally, it's like just hoping you've got things right and that you've put together something amazing.
Yeah, and kind of as we were doing the stream, obviously we could see bits of the chat coming through from Twitch and so on, so you could get an idea about bits of it. And then the other thing you probably don't realize when you're watching it is that room is really, really warm. So it's actually like a bit like of a weird experience generally. But yeah, it was really good. And then you have the slightly kind of meta experience of like when I finished my bit of the live stream, I kind of came off, I think came out and chatted to some of the team and stuff. But then they were watching reaction videos to it and stuff like that, because we're obviously following quite closely how the community were responding to it. And it was weird, like watching bits of myself being played back and stuff. It's all very odd.
Yeah, it was funny as well because like I was in there, I was just desperately trying not to look down the whole time at the chat, because we had it on that little iPad in front of us, and all I wanted to do was stare at chat, and out of the corner of my eye I could maybe just see it moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, but I've seen it move at 1,000,000 miles an hour when we've like caused people to panic by something. So a lot of the time I was just going, I hope that's a good sign. Like I have no idea. But yeah, thankfully it went down really well, which is good. So speaking of that stream, obviously we kind of briefly introduced you on the stream. You talked a little bit about being from the Jurassic era, I think you put it, of RuneScape, and then obviously you've been executive producer on Old School. Now you're partly on RuneScape again. So like, what is your background on RuneScape? Like, where before you were on OSRS as executive producer, what were you doing on RuneScape? What was your role and kind of what's your history with Jagex?
Yeah, so I've worked at Jagex for many years, and when I first joined the company, I was working on RuneScape. So, and I was mostly focused more on like the editorial side of the game, with a couple of people that the community might know, but I've forgotten the mod names of. But I worked with Mod Jack quite a bit before, like many years ago as well. So I worked mostly on like the editorial side. Also worked quite a lot on kind of like doing work on like the website and things as well. And then kind of gradually moved into more of a production role. So I worked with like various teams in RuneScape, and then I went on to various different products on Jagex. So I spent quite a few years working on Chronicle, which I greatly enjoyed. So
Nice.
the Late Lamented Chronicle. So I worked on that for a number of years, and then I worked on various other projects, and then kind of went back to. I did a load of work on Old School in like 2019, and then went back to Old School like permanently in 2021. And I've been like EP on Old School since then, and now obviously leading the RuneScape team as well. So this is my first time working back on RuneScape in quite a few years now, actually. But yeah, obviously working on RuneScape and Old School it's pretty busy, I would say, but I've been really enjoying it so far. In particular, it's been good to work with people again, like Mod Jack and so on, but also being able to chance to get to meet new people on the RuneScape team, like yourself, Mod Hooli, and some of the other devs and the designers and the artists and things like that. I've actually had a chance to work with the first time I've never met before. But it's been really fun.
Awesome. Yeah, actually didn't know you worked on Chronicle, which is a wild one. So you've really been around the houses on, like, you're kind of a RuneScape franchise master at this point, to be honest.
I've worked
Like,
on
is
everything.
that
It's probably a fair description. Yeah, Jagex, I've worked like nearly all sides of the business at various points. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, you just kind of mentioned it. So there was some I saw in the chat, looking back at the stream. Just for clarity for everyone, like, you're still working on Old School as well, right? It's just you're working on across both games at the moment. That's correct, right?
That's correct. I'm working on both games at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you sleep. To be honest, I don't know how you find time for it.
I spent all my time
RuneScape
thinking
is an
about the
intense game.
RuneScapes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot to consider. Yeah.
No, it's good. It's good. And I guess to go back a little bit, we're talking about Chronicle and everything. What did you most enjoy working on back in your original time in RuneScape? Because RuneScape veterans have been through a lot of content in their days. So, like, is there anything that stood out to you when you look back on working on RuneScape that you loved working on?
Yeah. I think that obviously it was a long time ago. Like some of the details elude me, but the overall the thing I remember most was it was just like a really exciting time to be working at the studio when I first joined. Like the game was like really popular then. And there was it was kind of an era of like quite a lot of classic content and stuff going out. I think there was quite a lot of like some of the main like Marjarat quests and stuff were being worked on, that kind of stuff. And the generally there's like a really good buzz working there. So I really enjoyed kind of working on in the games industry because I've been like a big games player for like many years, like since I was a really young child. Um, and I think that the other thing I was reflecting on earlier when we were kind of like talking and stuff was the fact that when I look back on it now, I kind of think also about how RuneScape and Jagex as a whole was really like quite innovative and ahead of the game and stuff, and the way that the game worked and it was distributed, and like even like the way you subscribe to the game like completely digitally and stuff like that was like really quite cutting edge at the time and quite a few years ahead of many other games, I'd say. And I also feel like when I think back at it, I kind of took it for granted at the time, but actually things like the way that the developers interacted with the community and stuff was really like again quite pioneering and original. And again, it's something that the games industry has kind of replicated a lot over the years, but being involved in that I found like pretty exciting as well, because you could wander around the office and you'd see the developers would just be on. This was back in the day of the RuneScape forums being like unbelievably busy, pre-Reddit and stuff. So you'd see all the devs actually on the forums, like reading the comments, replying to the players, and like getting feedback directly and stuff as well. It was a really fun time.
It is. Do you know, it's interesting because, like, I still think even now it's a bit of an anomaly. Studios I've worked at before here, the idea of developers kind of having the freedom to just go out and talk to players is like a hard no for a lot of places. That's not to say anything bad about those places. It's just like that was something that I came here and it was just really cool. It's like, oh, anyone can just go out and put a tweet out and say, hey, what do you think of this? And what do you think of that? We shut down, full honesty. I think when back in 21 there was a bit of a whoa, there's maybe a few too many things being said too early and being talked about a bit prematurely, and we kind of wound back a bit. But I hope last year it felt like we kind of had our devs out there a lot more, if you're listening out there, community, because we kind of tried to encourage our devs to be like, okay, maybe we reined you in a little bit too much here, because it's a bit of a magic of RuneScape, right? It's a pretty unique thing across both games, really. That to have devs out there like that, and I love it. Doom keeps people in check. True. It's very true. That is part of Doom, and I are here to enable as much as keep people in check, though. So yeah, it's a whole thing. By the way, I don't know if you're seeing this chat, Markos, but like this is one of the most wholesome RuneScape chats. We've gone down tangents about Bob's axes, and if you are older than Bob's axes in terms of experience in Gillinor. I don't know if you're like that comparison.
Someone was talking about Armies of Gillinor. I did do work on Fun Orb, so yeah, I played Armies of Gillinor, and Orb Defense was probably my favourite for people who played Fun Orb.
God, Fun Orb, that's throwback. Next, you're going to start mentioning Miniclip, and then I'm going to get proper flashbacks.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I'm going to do the classic. It's an important part of getting to know you, Markos. Right? I'm going to do the classic thing. You've got to pick something, your favourite child, not between RS and OSRS, because that would just be cruel. But what's your favourite thing about RuneScape if you had to pick? What stands out to you most?
Yeah, well, I think with RuneScape, I think the things I've always liked about it in particular is just like the uniqueness of the character and the tone of the game. Like it's because I worked with the developers and stuff, and I knew them. You could kind of see them almost like in the content and stuff, and I always found that like really fascinating. But like I think the unique character of the game and the tone and the humor and all that kind of stuff obviously is like particularly like important and stuff like that. I think most of the time I've spent in game has been focused around mostly questing and skilling, I think, because I'm not very good at combat or anything. Or the PvP is kind of moderately terrifying as well. And generally, I've grown up a lot playing a lot of RPGs and things, particularly more like open world type RPGs. So things like Oblivion and stuff like that are kind of like the games I really love. And there's quite a lot of similarities, I think, between those kind of games and RuneScape. There's a lot of shared DNA. So RuneScape, I think the things I've spent the most on is probably like what I've described as like the eternal loop of woodcutting and fire making. So I've spent a lot of time basically constantly cutting that down, and I find that just kind of like a soothing, relaxing experience, which I just quite enjoy doing, even though I realise it's somewhat mundane.
Oh, I get that. Like when I look back, and some people in chat said it as well, especially around like nostalgia and everything. The thing that I always remember is like being a younger boy and playing the game, and like finding every hour of the day I could do it. Waking up at like 5 a.m. to when mining resources were shared, and you had to compete with other people. Getting up with my friends so that we could go mine certain things. But the thing that always throws me back, and I'd be interested, chat, if this is the same for you. There are certain songs I have an association with that remind me of certain things in RuneScape. There are certain songs in my life that I still listen to now that if I hear them, I immediately think, oh, I'm walking from Lumbee to Varrock, right? It's like a trigger. And it just brings me out, yeah, I see people in chat saying the thing, right? And it's crazy. It's like it just brings you back to the moment like it can do for a memory in your life outside the game as well. And that's what always stands out to me is like, it's the only game I have that association with. It's really, really weird. Which also tells you that I had audio off, which I'm sorry, audio team. Your audio is amazing. Your music's amazing. I mean, you don't. No disrespect. Linkin Park, yeah. I've got some Linkin Park song associations as well. So, yeah, we should do something about that. We should celebrate that more. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent. Sorry. Okay, we should get into a little bit into like what I think a lot of people are here for, which is a little bit about where we're going, and a little bit about what's been going on as well. I think there's probably a lot to talk about there, and it's something that we didn't want to necessarily bring to a live stream where we wanted to talk forwards, but probably is really interesting to a lot of people who have taken the time to join us today. Firstly, let's talk about like you do have this benefit of having worked across both games. What is it you're most excited to bring from how old school RuneScape approaches things? And also, I kind of want to add to that because I think RuneScape does a lot of amazing things too. So, like, what's one thing you're most excited to bring out of RuneScape more that it already has too?
Yeah, I think with in terms of things to bring over from old school, like we touched on this a bit in the live stream the other day, but I think that some of it's to do with like the regularity of the community interaction. So it's making sure that we're talking to players through the development process and making sure they're on the journey with us, so they're kind of aware of what we're thinking, and we can kind of obviously the earlier we can kind of get like core feedback and validation and stuff like that, the better, because it means that the content will be released in the best possible shape. So some things like that. Obviously, we've been talking a bit separately around just making sure there's like regular beats of like talking to the players each week, giving information each week about new updates and things like that in terms of like or talking about the previously announced updates in more detail and so on. So that's more like blog posts and live streams and so on like that. So I think that would be really good, like bringing some of that stuff back, which RuneScape used to do and old school has kept doing over like recent years as well. The other kind of things I've been looking at is, and I've been working quite a bit with Mod Jack on, is around like the things like the roadmap structure and how we can get that a bit further out into the future, and so we can communicate it more earlier to the players in more detail and things like that. So what we did the other day in terms of showing like a quite detailed roadmap for like the next 6 months, is intended to be like quite similar to what we'll do in the future. It might be we keep a bit more back as a surprise in the future because unlike old school RuneScape, obviously we don't have to poll everything, so we can like release surprise updates which can come a bit out of the blue, and will hopefully be like really pleasant surprises for the players and stuff. But yeah, generally it's like structuring the roadmap and like looking at how we balance like the larger and the smaller updates, making sure that there's meaningful updates going each month and avoiding there being months where the only things going in are kind of like quite ephemeral content that kind of goes in and out of the game, like the short-term events and that kind of stuff. So it's trying to make sure there's a really good balance of updates and also making sure there's a variety of updates, which is one of the things we were really keen to do with the roadmap that we shared the other day. Making sure, like I mentioned, I talked earlier about skilling and questing being like my favorite thing. So making sure there's, there's a good amount of quests, like lore-based content. There's a lot of skilling activities, but then also there's quite a lot for the PVMers and so on as well. So all the different like the main player groups have got like good content that they can get stuck into on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think I hope that came through. I'll be keen to see what chat said, but I think that was something that stood out to me when we were looking at people talking about the roadmap afterwards. Just it felt like almost everything on the roadmap was being talked about in some ways. I think before we've had like certain audiences, like our PVMers or something, feeling super satisfied and talking lots about it. And we don't hear as much chat on everything else. It was really cool to see, Quest is coming out to talk about the fact that the storyline was continuing and that we're going to also get seasonal quests. We saw skillers talking about the skilling updates and what they might be coming with those for things like woodcutting and fletching. It's really awesome to see, and I think for me as a player, I'm quite a variety player, so it definitely hit me. But yeah, it sounds like chat very happy to hear the level of communication and also the variety. So that's really awesome. So it sounds like step one, okay, Markos, based on chat at least. Good start.
That's the dream, yeah. I think that obviously of all these things, it's kind of like persisting it over time is like be very challenging and a lot of work, but we need to make sure we do that as best we can.
Yeah. I think you say a phrase that I've been using for quite some time, but it's about putting actions to words, right? Like it's one thing to say what we're going to do and say all the right things, but then we have to deliver on it, right? So I'm excited to see us do that. It's going to be really, really good. So
Yeah,
on that
exactly.
point, obviously, oh sorry, you go.
No, you go. Sorry, no, it's fine. You go.
Sorry, I was going full into flow mode to keep the conversation moving. So let's talk about RuneScape actually. So obviously, you kind of giving your perspective on something you want to bring and love, bring more out of for both games and bring to RuneScape. I know you've only been working on RuneScape for a very short time now, but like, what's your impression so far about how the team feels when we think about last year, both in terms of like things that we think we could build on from last year, but also things that we think were challenges or things to have learned from?
Yeah, I think that there's like last year was obviously kind of mixed. I think that there's some really good releases. Obviously released a new skill, and there was lots of other like pretty like chunky updates and stuff, like particularly earlier in the year. And I recognised that the autumn was a more challenging period after like Hero Pass got released and things. I think that
I like the word
overall,
challenging.
yeah, I think overall the key thing that I've seen with the teams that I've been with it is that fundamentally it's a really talented team. Like they're really smart, they're very creative, they've got lots of really interesting ideas about stuff that we can do. The main challenge is more like how I can kind of help like get out of the way and just let them do that rather than overburden them with like process or whatever. So the main thing I want to be able to do is like empower the team more so they're actually more able to kind of make decisions about what they're making and in like a coherent way, obviously, like so like Mod Jack's obviously like got overview of all that kind of stuff as well. But the it's more like trying to get the team empowered so that they can like show off like their creativity and ideas and things they've got for the game. And then in particular also like we talked about earlier is like making sure that they're doing that, but it also dovetails with the regular talking to the community, keeping players up to date about what we're working on, making sure there's really good visibility in terms of like what the upcoming updates are and so on, so players know what they're getting for their subscription, and all those kind of things as well. So I think that's the key thing for me at the moment. It's just like almost like getting out of the way of the team and letting them just do stuff, and then and then just supporting them where they kind of need a help, like unblock stuff and so on.
Okay, so yeah, Jack just said it. I was about to bring you into this, Jack. saying I'm nodding along like I always do on streams, but no one can see me this time. Let's talk to you, Jack, as well. Marcus obviously gave loads of amazing insight there. I hope to people in terms of what we took away from last year. Is there anything you would add from your perspective, especially kind of obviously being lead designer, that you kind of stands out to you from last year?
Yeah, I mean it's been an interesting year in terms of thinking about like what we delivered and what went well and what didn't go well. My main focus during last year was on Fort Foreign 3, and that's been an interesting one in terms of learning that we like the main priority for me was delivering regular content and making sure we were doing something, and we were doing that. And it's kind of an interesting project to think about in the community, that the updates were actually being received quite well, but they kind of failed to deliver on the one key point of creating like a lot of deep gameplay for end game players. And so that's been the main takeaway for me for last year. Was it's really important for us to be shipping regular content, but we have to be hitting that like lots of long tail gameplay for everybody. And so that's informed like the skilling plan. I'll be talking about more next week or the week after about what we mean by skilling updates and how we're going to be approaching that, making sure there's a lot to do. So 4, 4, and 3, for example, was kind of an experiment in what if we attach a construction level to something? Will that work? And then I think the answer in retrospect is like, no, if you've already leveled construction, you kind of feel like there wasn't really anything to do that month. And if we look back, into the previous year, that was a kind of a similar attempt as well for something like Garden of Create, with the reward shop. So it's kind of about learning. And so I think, as Markos said, like that recommitment to like working with the community, making sure that we're ideally like the worst case is that we put the update out, we get feedback on the update, we learn for the future. The best case is that we're able to put the design out in advance and get feedback and improve it before launch. I think that's what we're all quite excited to do.
Yeah,
that'd be a really good way to do things moving forward. I'm quite excited for that.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things about going on stream, is like we kind of just, if you remember the little kind of get involved thing we put at the end of it, that came together super last minute, because we were like, we kind of have a mini roadmap, in a very small window of time, of like ways we want players to be involved, and we kind of sat there and realized that's actually very different for us. Like if I look back at last year, I was really, really happy to see how much we started to try and work with players more. Like we took those like first steps to like community hit list. Obviously, it was really great. Some of our most kind of well received updates last year was community hit list, which was amazing to see, and it just shows like how much we can gain from listening to players more and kind of being more direct with players. And then like I think about necromancy, most open developed skill. We brought the players in and got those creators who really helped make necromancy as good as it was at release with their feedback. By the way, my biggest regret is we didn't film that whole thing, because like if you could have been a fly on the wall players to be in that room and see how much like iteration was happening, like we'd have devs literally changing things in real time almost to respond to feedback and everything. It was amazing. We really should have done a documentary on it or something. But
yeah,
there was all these things we did.
I got Josh Hayes playing on a different build.
Yeah, I remember.
This, and I was like, oh well, I've been working with Sponge on a different build, so let's get that one loaded up and see whether you see what you think of it.
And it's like even some smaller things, like I talked a little bit at the top of the show, like we had kind of when I initially joined, there was like developers were a lot more kind of timid to go out and speak, because there'd been kind of some instance of things being said a little bit prematurely, and there was concern that like it's sometimes you have to talk about projects at the right time, and like there was a little bit of concern there, and so players got quite timid. Our JMods got a little bit timid about it because they felt like they might accidentally say something they shouldn't. And we put a big effort last year into kind of trying to enable those JMods to feel like they could go out there again. It's never, if you've ever felt our JMods have been quieter, it's never been because of them. And that's something that CM was doing last year, and that was really awesome to see. It was like how much, even Ramen just being like, hey, what would you like to see for Christmas? Like these small little things that mean a lot happening. So it was all that good stuff. But then there was obviously things like the misstep of Hero Pass, right? And like those sorts of things happen. So it's such a weird year to look back to. And actually, I guess like let's talk very briefly on Hero Pass, I think, because I think it'd be a disservice to not mention it at all during this chat. It's not something we've really had a chance to sit down and talk about at any point. Like, Markos, since you began working on the team, what's your take on Hero Pass? Like, what do you think the team's taken? I'd be keen to get your perspective on it.
I think the Yeah, because I think that, like, obviously this was a bit before my time, and my observations on Hero Pass were largely kind of like a bit from the sidelines, kind of seeing what was happening and things. And I've spoken to some of the people on the team around it and things, so I've been trying to get an idea about what happened. I think that, and I'm also conscious of, obviously the people working it had the right intentions and were trying to do and did like try to do the best possible work and things like that. So, but I think that the main disconnect was between like kind of expectations of versus what the reality was. So I think there was some kind of like roadmap reveal which hinted at an update in a certain month,
The
which ended
major
up being
update. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's a lot of the issue is kind of the disconnect between what was expected versus what was delivered, because generally when you see that, obviously you expect it to be like quite a chunky piece of like main game content or something. So I think that obviously put us into a weak position at the beginning, and then obviously like from what I've seen from the player feedback and stuff, it didn't really meet kind of like what they're expecting from the update and so on. And I think that ties a lot into what we've been talking about around just making sure we're talking to players early with projects and getting their feedback early, so we know if there is a fundamental issue of what we're building, we find out earlier and we can like adjust it into something which is actually more in line with what players are actually wanting. So yeah, I think that'd be my main kind of take home from it.
Yeah, I think something I'd also add to that as well. I know like there was a lot of discussion around things like the buffs and obviously the effect of removing daily challenges, and something that we really took from it was like, you know, if you see how we went out and kind of talked about it, we didn't see those issues. And it's they were something that like some of it had been discussed, and like the player perspective we got from that, there was so much we learned about how players can see things that maybe we just hadn't considered. It's not that we looked at those things and said they're not issues. It's just that, like, for example, I think a really interesting thing that stood out to me was this idea of kind of paid power with the buffs, and the team kind of looking at those and saying, oh, these are a nice additive thing. A lot of our players are on Premier membership, so they're going to get access to this as well. And obviously everyone got access to them. It was just at different charge levels. You know, there was consideration that went into those things, but the community kind of showed us like the real response in that situation, the kind of perspective that we'd missed. And that's why I'm really excited for this. Our ability to kind of develop with players involved is, yes, we have a lot of hardcore players at the studio. We have a lot of players at the studio, and the majority of our team play. Many of them read the internet every single day, and are very, very plugged into you as well as themselves as players. But there's always things the players will find. There's always things the players will identify that maybe we haven't considered fully, or haven't caught, or whatever. And it was really, really interesting to me to see that and kind of have that wow moment, like, you know, how did we not catch that? Like, oh, now that they say it, kind of makes sense. Jack, I guess to your point, like, is there anything you'd add to that? Like, am I off piece there, or do you kind of agree? Obviously, I'm saying this as a community manager in the middle, but
Yeah, no, I would definitely say like our reaction to Hero Pass was essentially, how did this happen? Like, what have we, like, obviously we did something wrong, right? I don't think there's any point bouncing around that. So then the question for us is, what did we do wrong? How do we how do we stop this? We've done the wrong thing. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again. It's kind of almost a mini EOC moment in that regard. And I think our takeaway internally was, we've just got to talk to the players more, right? And so then that provoked a fairly intense internal discussion at every level of, well, how are we going to talk to the players more? What does this mean? To an extent, it kind of forced us onto the back foot a little bit of how should we be talking about content? Does this mean that, you know, for example, you know, a fairly serious question to ask is, should we be adopting the old school polling system? Would that work better for us? And so there were a lot of internal discussions about how we should be approaching content, to what extent we should be involving players in the discussion. The answer, as Markos has been reiterating, is, you know, we need to be involving players a lot more. I think the clear absolute takeaway, I think, that we're now all committed to is, our priority has to be shipping like substantial regular content, with the caveat that, like, for various reasons that are quite complicated to get into, but for, you know, something like Hero Pass is not what we mean when we say substantial content. You know, we're not talking about something like that. And again, as Marcos mentioned earlier, like, a temporary event does not count as substantial content, something like that, you know. So it was an analysis of, you know, what are we being told, what's the feedback, how do we avoid doing something like this, and
yeah, I mean,
that way, we can make what players want.
Yeah, no, actually, there was a lot of. I remember there being a lot of soul searching for all of us at the studio. Because it's not, if you look back, especially at RuneScape, yes, we've had a couple of moments that have kind of upset the community on a fairly big scale. But like Hero Pass, I think, was just so unexpected for us. There was a bit of a soul searching moment of like what led to this. There was a lot of things I think we learned from it as a team, and not just about the Hero Pass specifically, but just about RuneScape. Like I remember, Jack, one of the things that kind of I always remember back on is, daily challenges, the importance of that as a kind of ritual for so many players that like, we wanted to change and kind of modify and make better essentially as an experience. Like that was kind of the idea of the Hero Pass mission system, is something more relative to your play and something that actually was a better experience. But like that's an example of something that's just embedded in how we all play RuneScape, and we kind of didn't quite. I don't know if this is fair to say, Mod Jack, but it feels like all of us, myself included, we didn't quite put the weight on that ritual in our daily RuneScape lives that actually to some people is kind of part of what RuneScape is to them, right?
Yeah,
and
I think
and those
so.
are the sorts of ways we've changed our thinking in terms of how we look at a lot of content development now, right?
It reminds me of a story very, very early when I first started on RuneScape. I can't remember what the update was now, but it was not long after the Dungeoneering, and someone had made an update which just moved one tree. Well, it's not the famous Timbo example, but just one of the trees had moved. I think a tree had moved into the middle of a field or something, and I remember reading a player on the forum saying, like, every day for the last 5 years, I've done the same rune running course, and you've just moved a tree right in the way of me. This is a really annoying update, and it kind of reminds me of that, of like RuneScape is so much about like these rituals, as you put it,
Yeah,
and like
rituals,
making
yeah.
sure that we are respecting that and protecting the way that you want to play the game. Yeah, I would agree with that.
If you can believe it, there's still things scapers to learn about you 23 years in. Even with as many veterans as we have on the team, there's always ways you can surprise us, which is amazing. But yeah, I do feel like on at least on a community side, I can say for sure, I feel like I understand scapers even more than I felt I did before, which is amazing. Right, I'm aware, Markos. Jack and I went down a rabbit hole there, talking back about the past. Let's talk about this year, which you're a lot more closer to. So I think it's fair to say we touched on this a little bit. Oh, just before I go any further, for those of you listening live, we are aware you have questions in the JMod questions channel. Don't worry, we're going to get to those in a minute. Got a few more to get through on our side. We'll leave some time for them. Don't worry. But Mod Markos, I think we touched on the stream, but this year felt kind of undoubtedly different, I think, to how we've been usually. I felt like we were a lot quieter, and I felt players did as well. I think we all recognise our content cadence took a bit of a dip. Things just generally felt different. Like RuneScape felt different for a few months this year so far. There's a lot of context behind that we haven't had a chance to talk to the players about. So let's chat about it, as I know you're keen to kind of bring players into that story. What's some of the work that's been going on? Like what's been going on over the past couple of months at the studio, and kind of, why did things feel a little bit different in that time?
So there's a degree of recalibration as we kind of re-examined, I guess, like how we make content for the game and how we deliver it, and the stuff we talked about earlier in terms of how do we get players better involved, what kind of cadence do we want to be hitting with the content, what types of content do we want to be doing, and so on. So the main focus that I've had since I've been working with the team in particular, and this is kind of largely a reflection of more my production background, because I tend to look at it through that lens, is more very much focusing around how do we deliver the content on a regular basis, and what are we delivering. So, and in particular, just a real focus much more on like delivering as much value as possible to the players. So like, how can we build a roadmap roughly around those principles? And then when I was when I started working with the team again, I was working with Mod Jack quite a bit, and he already had a lot of like strong ideas about what we can do around this. So it was mostly a case of working with Mod Jack and some of the other mods in a small group, and just like iterating the roadmap and getting it into really good shape, and trying to make sure that we had effective like guiding principles in terms of the types of content we were making and the regularity, of making sure that it was strong as possible and that we knew we could deliver it, so that with as much confidence as possible within any kind of games development environment. Yeah, that's been the main thing, is kind of just like reevaluating like how we're delivering the content and making sure that it's the right types of content delivered regularly enough in the right way, and like there's enough communication with the players and so on.
Yes, we kind of root and definitely in my time here, I've never seen kind of as much of a root and stem kind of reanalysis of how we do everything, really. Which I know obviously you kind of came into the process kind of the later stages of and kind of put your stamp on it as well, and brought in some learnings from old school. But it has really been a lot of kind of reevaluation from top to bottom, really, hasn't it, about how we operate as a team?
Yeah, and I think that, like I mentioned, like Mod Jack had, a lot of solid plans basically, and it was a question of like iterating from those rather than doing anything from scratch. And then what I tried to be able to do is try and bring some of the practices over from old school, and these would be things that are maybe less visible to the players in terms of just like methods of like how we select projects and like how we like construct the overall roadmap. And generally with old school, we have like quite a long-term plan of what we could do. Obviously, everything's polled, so it's all like subject to that. But we generally have ideas into the future of like what we're looking to do. So you'll have seen earlier in the year we released Varlamore, but that had been teased for quite a few years in advance. So and then with RuneScape, it will be a question of we kind of like sat down and went over the plans that were already there and like iterated them a bit, and we've shared like the roadmap through to the end of the year. And then the idea is that we already have, a reasonable idea of what we would do through to the middle of next year. And then now it's the question of like iterating that, making sure that the first half of next year is like as good as possible, and then extending it so we have like an idea through to the second half of the year. And then ideally we'd be able to then talk to the players quite soon around, I say quite soon, this will probably be more like Septemberish time, around like what the major beats are for kind of like 2025 and so on. So trying to build out that longer horizon line, and that ties into kind of what you were saying around just like modifying some of the processes. But generally the team had really good ideas, and it's like a question of just letting them do it and get on with it as much as possible.
Yeah, it's funny you saying about like I still can't get my own head around, let alone I'm sure for the community, the idea that they're going to hear about 25 content in as early as September. Like it's been a long time since we've been able to do that and done that, so that's going to be really cool. Mod Jack, is there anything you want to add? Just conscious about the kind of what's been going on over the past few months. Do you feel like Markos covered anything? Was there anything you wanted to add?
No, yeah, I think that mostly covers it. Yeah, just the I think we are all. Just want to re-emphasize that we are all committed to like making sure that we're shipping content and making sure that we're doing more to incorporate player voice into what we do via whatever the best way we can do that for the particular case, like the project. The ones I'm most excited for are where we can just put the whole design out there and openly discuss it, as early as possible. But we can't do that with a quest, for example. But for a scaling update, that might make perfect sense. So I'm quite excited for Sponge. Sponge is going to be he's going to be putting some weapon effects on a beta so that people can try them out, and that's such a good way to do it, because we always have such a problem with like balancing post-launch. That was such a topic of discussion for the FSOA, where because the effect kind of went live, it has such a weird effect on the economy if we make changes to it post-launch. So doing that pre-launch is such a good, like, even if we can't put the entire update on a beta, which is kind of impractical, we can just put that one critical element on a beta. That's a really efficient way of
so
dealing
cool
with the scariest element of the update. So yeah, I'm really excited for.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm so excited for players to essentially go, yeah, I want that T95 kind of feeling, and for us to not put it out there and then be like, oh, it's not quite hitting what they. Like, it doesn't feel like it's meeting the kind of thing they had in their head, or maybe from a balance perspective isn't quite there. Like, it's gonna be really, really cool to do. I'm really excited to do that, and look out for more on that next week. If you're listening to that, this on the 17th of May. We're going to be having a stream next week on the 21st of May with Sponge and Mod Ryan to talk about Sanctum of Rebirth and also some of the ways that you can start providing us feedback. We're going to open up some topics on that, so stay tuned. There's a couple of quick things I just want to talk about from a community perspective, just to add to your answers, really. I think the first thing is, like, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who was kind of bearing with us over the kind of months where we were quieter. Because we were doing that root and stem review, there was some kind of careful communication about what we could say and when that came into play. And I know it was really frustrating to not hear much from us, and we desperately wanted to. We were talking about how do we bring you on this journey, and then we felt like that would raise more questions. I think the main thing to know is we've set ourselves up now not just on the development side, as Markos and Jack have been talking about. I'll never get used to calling you Mod Jack. But even from a community side, like we're now in a position where I think from a communication standpoint, we're working with Mod Markos to have kind of the things that you need to hear and when you need to hear it, when it comes to things like content announcements, or even when it comes to how early we announce our projects. These are all things that we're working on holistically now. So rather than kind of communication kind of working around the projects as we often did, now we're kind of working closely together. We're all kind of part of the same unit, which is amazing, and I think you'll feel that, and I hope you will. But the main thing is just thank you for that quieter period. We know it was frustrating and it was difficult to do that. We wanted to kind of bring you and keep you informed, but there's certain ways we have to do things at certain times, and we appreciate all of you. I think the second thing is what I hope you'll see from us this year on the communication front isn't just around development. Now that we're in a position to kind of have, this great kind of more player involved development and working, we're also trying to bring more consistent communication alongside that. So what you're going to see from us this year is kind of the return of weekly live streams. It might take us a while to get there, but we're setting up to do that again. We're also going to try and do more fun live streams, more things that are not what you always see when it comes to kind of what we've been focusing on lately, which is content announcements or sharing development insight, but just getting things like JVM happening again, having more fun with the community. You can see us support creators a lot more. I know many of you love creators out there, and creators have their own incredible communities for RuneScape and deserve for us to give back to them as well for the communities they build within RuneScape itself. And that's not just people who create videos or stream, but we're talking artists and community leaders. We're really trying to do more there. I think most of all, what I hope you feel from us this year is a lot more kind of openness and honesty and transparency in terms of on the regular, right? Like we've always tried to be that, but I hope you see more. You'll feel more kind of calls like this where we kind of have a Discord stage and talk a little bit more chilled out and bring you into it. And I hope this feels like a good start. We just got to keep it up. But yeah, it's been exciting for us as well to kind of rebuild from the ground up as well. So, right, back to the guest star because I want to make sure we got some time for some questions. I just want to ask you one more question, Markos. What's your kind of vision for RuneScape as it stands? I know you are newly on the team, and I know it's very much a team-built thing. But if you had to describe it right now, what would you kind of describe it as?
That's a good question. I think that there's some spoilers potentially if I go into that too much. I think that at a high level, I would say that I want to make sure the game's set up to be as successful as possible for as long as possible. So trying to create like a really compelling like long-term plan for like what the game is and where it's going and things like that, and making sure that's better communicated to players so they really believe in it. That's kind of like what I'm trying to head towards. I know that sounds a little bit fluffy, but we want to be able to communicate something probably in a bit more detail in a few months, I suspect, more along those lines. And then also when we're looking at like what's in, say, the 2025 roadmap or 2026, it's going to be, that will be beginning to tie more into that kind of type of overall vision for the game, I think, as well.
Brilliant. That's great. I guess let's get to some community questions. So I'm aware we don't have a lot of time, but thank you for sharing with that. And it's also worth saying, it was mentioned earlier, I forgot to add on, Markos was talking about our 2025 planning. Obviously, we have a picture that we've built for 2025 that's very much in progress, but it won't be finalized, and we won't kind of make our final plan for what we're doing in 25 without your help. And that's through the survey. We've had an incredible, and I mean incredible, amount of completions on that survey. It has blown us away. It's a very big survey. If you haven't gone and done it already, it does take time. Some people have taken as much of an hour on it. I hope that's not the average. But hey, if you enjoy it, that's all that matters. But the survey that we put out is very different to the other surveys you've experienced. The other surveys we've done have been very much kind of a check and wanting to get an understanding of how you felt about recent content, how about kind of give us a bit of guidance on what we're doing well and not doing well. This is very different. This is about where could we go? What do you feel about this? What do you feel about that direction? It's really a guiding force for us. And if there's one thing you do in the community this year, as much as I want to hear from you all the time, and I want you out there chatting amongst each other and creating the amazing community that you are, it's to go fill out that survey, because it really will be, this is going to be one of the crucial things that will help us kind of build that 25 roadmap. and build it in a way that feels like it's informed by what you're looking to see from RuneScape. So it really is that important. It's not like it's not me overstating this. It is something that will be a core part of our planning. So please do complete it out, and it will also help us forward. And thank you for all the kind comments, by the way. A lot of you have said how amazing that survey was. A lot of people worked so hard on that thing. If it took you an hour to complete, think of how long it took to put together, and it means a lot to everyone that you felt so passionately about it and about how good it was. So thank you for that. Right, into our last 10 minutes. So let's get to some questions. I'm going to go into... Okay, this first one I should have expected that I've seen that seems to have the most upvotes I can see. Oh, actually, there's a higher one. Let's go with that first. Pi is asking, are there many interesting trends on the survey so far, at least that you'd be willing to share at this point?
I've got a great one. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Oh yeah, you go for it.
The looking at the early data, so the data's not all in yet, but looking at the early data, woodcutting and fletching is very popular. I'm excited.
Yeah, supposedly is. Yeah, it's very interesting. Markos, was there anything you wanted to add beyond what?
I've only seen some fairly basic data so far on it. So mostly the bits I've seen so far have just been around like feedback on the roadmap for coming 6 months. The bit I'm really interested to see though was obviously there was some various ideas suggested for things that could be done over the next couple of years and stuff. So I'm particularly keen to see kind of what the responses were to those.
Brilliant. There's a lot of questions to go through. I'm trying to organise by upvotes as best I can. There is a question I also should have expected. Someone is asking about player avatar refresh. Obviously, it wasn't in our roadmap. Is there any thoughts we have on that right now? Obviously, it's always been something that since we kind of showed it in development has been popular. Do you have any initial thoughts on it, Markos, or is it too early to say from your short time on the team?
I need to get a clearer idea because I know it gets brought up quite a lot from seeing the chat and the social media and stuff. I need to get an idea around where the project is and like how expensive it is to do because I think it's quite a complex, large project. So I'd need to get an idea about where we are in development and how much work's left, and then basically, as always, it's a trade-off. If you do that, there's a lot of other stuff you can't do, so we need to weigh it up.
Oh
against
yes.
those. I am interested into seeing more detail about what the project is and what its possibilities are.
Yeah, I think when I look back, the one thing I love about that is it was one of the first projects we were like did that kind of open development community involvement thing on, really. Like it's kind of like where we are going to be moving forward. So it's really interesting from that perspective that it kind of, because of that, there's a lot of personal attachment to it, on top of the fact that, you know, obviously it's a great idea of a piece of content, albeit with a lot of technical issues between us and bringing it to life. But Jay Vampire asks, would you ever make the community hit list openly available for everyone to see and comment on?
Interesting. Yeah, we have discussed doing things like that before. The challenge is how it operates generally in terms of like what software you use and like how you make it visible or manage people's expectations around stuff actually getting done. But yeah, that is something we've discussed before, and it could be of interest. But we need to see how feasible it is to do it in a way that isn't like quite misleading potentially.
Yeah, we had a call with QA who have been raising this as an idea as well just today. Yeah, it's a really cool idea. Like you said, there's a lot of considerations with it, but definitely from a community angle, not closed either. That's what I'd add to that. The RS guy asked something that's getting a lot of upvotes, and I think I saw in chat a lot, so this is a really good one for you. With all the planned content in the roadmap, it seems like the majority of projects are very early in development. Is there any concern that you won't be able to meet the announced production schedule, or are you feeling confident about that aspect of it?
The eternal question of games development, I think. At the moment we're confident, but obviously the priority generally will be to release things in the best possible state. So we don't want to, for example, release something hypothetically in September if we know it's not right and it's not good enough. It's better for us to delay it than release it in a suboptimal state. And the other thing we don't want to do is force the team to do extra hours and stuff to hit dates because there were unforeseen things that required extra work, which meant the original date wasn't possible. So we'll try and hit those dates as much as possible, but being transparent, it is games development. So there's always a risk that some of those things will slip a bit, but the goal is to do all those things as we said.
Rickard, I think there was also, a lot of scoping work and keen production work that went into to that before we announced the roadmap as well, right? So we're going in, at least in the state we're in a state of confidence. And as you said, then the realities of game development, you never know what might be around the corner, but
yes,
it is highly
was all
considered,
ratified,
isn't it, Markos?
Yes, it was all ratified by production. They went through and scoped it and things, yeah.
Yeah. So, right, I do want to say, you may notice Mod Jack fall off the call because Mod Jack had a hard cut 5 minutes before the end of our show. So goodbye to Mod Jack. Thank you.
Gonna go now. Bye bye. Thank you.
Goodbye, Mod Jack. So goodbye. Right. So if you are asking questions, please use the upvote feature because we're going down. I'm trying to pick out the ones I'm noticing have the most upvotes, given that we have a limited amount of time. Just going up really high to make sure I didn't miss any. No, it doesn't look like I did. Okay, so the next one I'm seeing with a lot of upvotes. It's another player avatar refresh one. People asking, there's quite a lot of questions about how's this doing in the survey, how's that doing in the survey. That's probably not the right kind of questions to ask here, mainly because it's ongoing now. But it's good to know you would like to hear what kind of our outcomes are from the survey. That's something we can take away and think about for sure. But I think we'll point things that we can more put at Mod Markos that are not things in progress. Speaking of which, 4XXP has asked, OSRS is borrowing some RuneScape 3 devs to help with sailing. Are there any plans for RuneScape 3 to borrow old school RuneScape devs to help with projects like Group Iron Man?
Not at the moment, but what we tend to do is the devs that worked on Group Iron Man for old school are consulting on the project. Is probably the best way to describe it. So they've been advising the RuneScape team on how it was implemented and making recommendations on best approach and so on.
Good, yeah. I know Group Iron Man obviously is something we have another game to leverage from and see how they did it, though with a lot of our own custom work to go into it. I should stress that it's not an easy thing for us to go build. It's not like a drag and drop by any means. And I want to say that for our tech team, who would kill me if I ever give that insinuation, because our tech team have a lot of work between here and there to get done.
It's a very
Ariane's
complex project, man.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
It's a very
yeah,
complex
it's very.
project,
Yeah, very. Ariane is asking, are there any plans in the future to potentially give some love to the clan system, whether it be as little as some nice quality of life updates, interface tweaks, or full-blown changes to things like the Citadel?
So we have actually discussed some of that internally quite recently. We are looking at options for clans to see what is feasible, and then again, as always, we need to weigh it up against other stuff in the roadmap to see is the updating the clan system, is that more valuable than other types of updates we can do? But it is something we've discussed a few times, yeah.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of clannies having to hear that. You're always in our minds, clannies. We're always talking about you. It's something that clans are a common topic at the show, I can tell you that. M_with_Z asks a question that I've seen a lot of people ask in various different forms. I believe in the live stream, there was a mention that RS3 would not have polls like the OSRS community. In what methods are we expected to be able to communicate our feedbacks on topics? So essentially, I think the summation of the question that I'm seeing mostly everywhere is, if we're not going to be a poll-led game like OSRS, or a very deeply involved poll game like OSRS, what's your kind of vision for how players will be involved with development?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think some of that is to be established over time. So I'd be particularly working with yourself, Mod Hooli, I think. So it would be via channels like such as Discord and things, where we would try and gather more kind of empirical data, I guess, in terms of like what players' feedback is and making sure that it's aligned with kind of what players are looking for in it. There are any concerns they've got with the update are properly addressed. The polling system is it's very much like an old school thing. It works really well for old school, but I think transplanting it directly over to RuneScape may not quite work. And I think that there are other methods we can use to try and get community feedback and make sure it's integrated into the process, which give a bit more flexibility to the roadmap and so on.
Yeah, brilliant. I think, yeah, just to add, you were saying from a community perspective, I'd describe it as it's going to be a lot more of a verbal kind of, I think OSRS is also very verbal, but we're going to focus a lot on kind of bringing you into the conversation, bringing you into design, working out really great ways that we can involve as many people as possible and kind of having a voice in the shaping of our content. And we'll do that at various stages for different projects. We'll have different approaches, but we're going to really put a focus on kind of dev to player interaction, and that's kind of we're going to use feedback to inform. I think another thing I'd be personally keen to see, really excited that we're using a beta for what's coming up with Sanctum of Rebirth to kind of test some ideas around weapons. That's something we've not really ever done before that I'm aware of. Definitely thinking about how we use betas to do cool things like that. More remote play tests, things like that, I think are all things we're thinking about for sure.
Yeah, I think it's also worth.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, one final thing. I think it's also worth noting that the polling system is only part of the process with old school. So
Yeah, exactly.
you have the polling process, but then actually we spend more time doing like dev blogs and the iteration cycle around those rather than the poll itself. And the poll tends to be focused very much more on like the reward structure necessarily rather than like aspects of the content. So I think that I think we can still pretty heavily involved with the community on the updates we're doing.
All right, I'm gonna leave you with one last question before I do the outro and wrap this up. This is a question we get a lot in and out of the show. Inverted skill capes? ? Are they on your radar, Mod Markos?
They are now. I'd not heard of them until the other day. So that was quite interesting. I thought when we were like doing the live stream a day and everyone kept going on about inverted skill capes, I had to ask basically what they were. So yes, we have discussed them. I think we'll explore options around that probably.
So there you have it, Scapers. The inverted skill capes are on our minds, even if they weren't on our roadmap for this year. We are definitely talking about them. Mod Markos, obviously it is time to start wrapping up the show and let you go and enjoy your weekend after a very long week. Is there anything you'd like to say to the community before we wrap up or add?
Yeah, so it's well, thanks for kind of coming along to this. I wasn't really expecting quite so many people, so thanks for like bearing with us and spending an hour kind of listening to me talk about RuneScape and things. And also just thanks for your support over the last few months. I realise it's been a challenging period for quite a few of the players. Obviously, you've been waiting to kind of get a lot more confirmation about what's going on and so on. So I think it's exciting times ahead, but yeah, just please bear with us. Obviously, there's we'll be ramping up over the next few months, but already in recent weeks we've had some really good updates, I think. So really excited to what we can do in the future and looking forward to spending more time with you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I think, Scapers love to hear from the kind of the people at the front of the game, thinking about the future of the game, and I think it's been a pleasure to have you on, Mod Markos. My first time hosting as well. First time in the studio for a stream, and now first time hosting a Discord stage. But here we are. It's been a week at first, but thank you so much, Mod Markos, for being part of this and for taking the time on your Friday among the 2 games you work across to speak to the community. I think I speak for everyone in chat to say a big thanks. So to anyone who's not joining us live as well, thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. Whether you listened to us live or you joined us after the fact, we'd love to know what you think about this format. We're trying to kind of mix up between live streams and this kind of live streams as the more of a show aspect where we're kind of doing something more specific, even if it's just something like JVM. And then these is more casual chat where we can just talk to you, bring you inside the studio, some of our thinking and where we're going. So please do let us know. And other than that, I think it's been a pleasure to have you here. And we'll see you all soon again, Scapers. Have a great weekend.